board. Fall 22, CDEV, Child Development 205-202. We're talking about the IEP today. This is a lot. And since this semester it's an accelerated class, we had to double up. We do 4 chapters in 3 weeks. So this is a lot, and I want to get through this so I can give a sneak peek of the exam. If you are here in class, you will get the sneak peek of the exam. So let me share the module. Very cool. All right, so this is chapter 3 or chapter 4, and then into module 4. Again, intros look the same. And here's our schedule for the week. If you need to be late on anything, do not be late on the discussion board, right? I don't accept discussion boards late, but everything else, just let me know. Hey, this is going to come in. Most everybody's great with it. And I sent a lot of reminders out recently. So they're just reminders. I'm not mad, but I can tell you after this unit, if it's late, I'm going to start putting in a 0. And what that does is that it'll bring your grade down. Because if we have 10 things due in a class and you've only turned in 5, it's only calculating your grade on the 5. Once I put those zeros in, it calculates your grade on the 10. So people freak out. I'm like, my grade dropped. I'm like, just get the work in. I can regrade it. If it's a 0, the only thing that's going to stay is the discussion board 0. But it's 15 points. It's not the end of the world. I've also announced a couple of extra credit opportunities. Go for it. Go for it. So again, here is the lecture from last semester. This is the one with Professor Fernandez. And then I did an entire lecture just on my son's IEP. And I think he shows up about 3/4 of the way through. Ugh, I have to tell you, this week has been really, really hard for him at school. He has had a lot of emotional stuff. Even though he's got a therapist at school on his IEP, we see a therapist Wednesday nights. He has ABA that comes with the therapist, but she's more of a counselor. I kind of don't count that because they just kind of back each other up. And then he also has equine therapy 3 Saturdays a month, and he has mentoring. So 4 formal therapists, which is really odd because you really only just need 1, but the child with high needs, yes. And then the mentoring program's been really awesome too. He has a lot of support, but man, that IEP is wild. And that's even before, during COVID, the school district was not doing their job properly. I think everybody was kind of thrown sideways, but the federal government is not an option. And so I did take the Tustin School District to due process, meaning you blew it, you need to fix it. And if they blow it, they have to then, we had to calculate on what the things he missed were and what we need to make up for those things. And so, yeah, I want to do process. This just wrapped up last June. And so almost every single part of this chapter I've lived through. It's wild. He's literally at a different school where we'll talk about placements, about in the school, in the classroom, out of the classroom, into a different school, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't mean to be the expert at the IEP, but I've been through so much of it. And again, I started this statement off with, he's had such a rough week. The school district called another IEP to check in. Why he literally cried all day Monday. He cried all day. He participated in 2 classes. And so, yeah. And I was like, yeah, we'll do an IEP. We can check in. But I was like, I'm not available for October. So by the time November rolls around, he'll be fine. It's like, hopefully. But I could tell you, historically, humans have this piece where we tend to have like better times of the year than others. In October, he typically unravels. So we're like, we'll see. And then here's a PowerPoint PDF. So I'm just going to download the PowerPoint and go from there. I do have the book on the backside that we can look at too if we need. But before we jump into this, let's talk about some questions. Oof, what do you guys already know about the IEP? What have you heard about it? Or maybe what have you read about it? Or maybe some questions going forward. I just want to make sure I hit all the stuff when you ask. I don't want to skip anything. Nothing? It's all good? You guys got it? It's a lot.
With IEP, like throughout the lecture, like the slides and the reading, like I read it up, like it's ages older than 3. So like when they're like starting school and all that. Yeah, like that's when like school's starting the beginning.
Yes. So so there's one when they're super little called the IFSP. So it's like a family support plan. It's an individual family support plan. So what happens is, like, when children are first born, let's say sometimes you know that your child's going to be born with a disability. They have spina bifida or they have a genetic something going on, or there was a trauma during the birth. And so there is something obviously going to be like on point at the time of birth. And so that's when they kind of like the hospital will have a discharge plan. So my aunt had Down syndrome when she was born. That's a genetic disorder. And so now it was done differently back then, but now they'll say like, okay, so let's get you some supports. Let's get you a nurse to come in and make sure everything's okay. And let's make sure you've got good health care. And let's get you connected to the regional center. So it's like circling the wagons, right? And the IFSP is for the school part of that says who's in our team, right? And then they transition to an IEP. Now the IFSP usually holds until they get into an academic program, meaning preschool is not really academic, but kinder is. And so I did that transition because we knew something was going to be up with me, but he wasn't behind developmental until about 3 months old. So between 3 and 6 months old, I was able to get him to OTPT. And then at 3, I connected him to the school district, and the IFSP was just transitioning his first IFSP transition to an IEP when he went into kinder. And in fact, when I was asking for educational supports in preschool, they're like, well, we don't have educational supports. Kinder is an educational. So remember, pre is practice for K and K is practice for 1, right? But there's really not a lot of academics per se in preschool, meaning it's more social. It's more like, let's put our backpack here and our hands are for touching and let's follow the rules and jump on 1 foot, those sorts of things, right? And here's free time and here's how we put our blocks away. Just very like human basic programming, right? And then it moves into an IEP. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Yeah, so depending on the student's educational needs, the IFSP is a little bit more social worky. It's all the pieces. And then the IEP is just for education. Make sense? Whew, I'm going to give you guys some high points here because we only have 30 minutes. But again, you have a ton of resources in there. I mean, I share with you guys a lot of stuff. Again, and then as a heads up, during Thanksgiving week, my son is off for the whole week. So he'll be like over my shoulder. I'll be lecturing from home. He'll be over my shoulder and he's always like, I want to say hi. I want to say hi. I want to say hi. So you guys will get to meet him and I'll share with you some Mr. Inclusion pictures too. He's a charming 15-year-old, but he's still 15. So again, we're going to talk about, again, the 504 and the IEP is only for students with disabilities. And please don't ever say, and somebody says, oh, well, those kids get a better education. No, it's bringing up the bottom so we have an equitable education. Again, federal legislation means it's not optional. And we talked about the 504. That's, if you were here in class, you could see the video, but then I got in trouble for putting drunk history on there, but I have the link down there. I'm not supposed to show videos in here that are like copyrighted. I did not know that. They told us for educational purposes, we can share them, but we can't show them. Ugh. So that's on me. I'm still seeing if I can edit that out because it was a good lecture before that too. Again, the 504 is the first step of the Rehabilitation Act, and then the IEP is a carve out of that. So the 504 still stands. It's almost like an IEP light. And so don't think that if you don't qualify for an IEP, you won't get services. Sometimes all you need is a 504. It's like this, like the 504 is like this and the IEP is like this. It's just bigger, but it depends on what the student needs. Again, a lot of students, even with intellectual disabilities, need speech therapy, right? So a 504 doesn't include speech therapy. A 504 is only for accommodations and modifications like glasses, sitting closer to the front of the class, more time on test, maybe a scribe and things like that. So again, this is in 1975, we started the Education for All Handicapped Children. We do not use handicap as a term anymore. We say disabled, or if we're saying somebody who's retarded, we don't use that term anymore. We say intellectually disabled. And now it's called the Individuals with Disabilities. See, person first language, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. You will be tested on person first language on this first exam. So Bill Clinton signed the 1997 Reauthorization Act of IDEA, which is great. And look, there's a little friend here. And then again, how's it changed over time? We kind of talked about this a little bit, how we haven't always done a really good job with disability services, but early intervention services it started around the Johnson administration, and universal preschool is finally going to become a reality in California. Universal kinder wasn't even mandatory when I was little. You just started first grade. What? Now their kids would be behind if they started first grade. And then autism was the newest category added here. And so again, we talked about OHI that has ADHD. I don't know why it's not a separate category, but we'll see. We'll see. Again, here, you don't have to have these memorized, but I will ask you these things on the exam. Just pull up your book, or pull up this lecture. Again, we have things like 1999 IDEA, 1990 ADA. That's for the entire country. This is just for education. And then reauthorized in 1997. Sometimes they just polish it up, or they added OHI here. And then there's also here ESSA, I'm sorry, the No Child Left Behind Act that got revamped into Every Student Succeeds after 2010. So all these, these were like the building blocks to make that pyramid of special education. Now, as a reminder, special education is a program, not a person. There's the ESSA in 2015. This is the Obama one. So includes considerations, doesn't say mandatory education, but considerations for gifted students. And it says we have to train teachers to actually do this. So again, you don't have to be a special education teacher to know this stuff. You, even in your general education class, you will have kids on a 504, or maybe even on an IEP. Let's say you have a kid who has high functioning autism and they're in their special education classroom setting all day, but they excel at grade level or above in, let's say you teach chemistry. Boom, you have that one kid in your chemistry class. It happened, yeah. So again, we need teachers who are even in gen ed who know this stuff. A lot of students will say, but I don't want to be a special ed. You don't need to be a special ed teacher to know this stuff. This is the law. It's not optional. Every school uses this. Every teacher should know this stuff, right? Again, IDEA provides the educational guarantees, but 504 is that first little carve out. And again, they're different, right? They're a little bit different. So you don't have to know the differences, just know that they work in tandem. They work in tandem. But section 504 just says, if you need supports, we give you the supports. IDEA says, if you need additional supports, like one of the 13 disability specific categories, we'll give you those, right? If you don't qualify, you don't qualify. You could go through all these assessments, all these massive assessments and just not qualify, right? You might not be disabled enough, right? Because one of my godsons, he had some 504 accommodations modifications, because every time he took the assessment test, he just didn't quite fit. And now he's the officer in the Navy. It's like high school just was not his gig, but like the Navy is doing it for him. It was great. Again, section 504, it prohibits discrimination, right? And IDEA guarantees. So it's like, if you think of 504 was like, okay, fine, we won't discriminate. It's almost like the most passive minimum thing they could have done. And now IDEA is like, all right, let's actually organize the party. Let's put some positive supports into place instead of like, okay, fine, we'll recognize you. But we keep 504 in as the recognition of accommodations and modifications. Again, basic guarantees are you get an evaluation and it is free. The IFSP is for little kids, right? And then it moves into the it moves into the IEP. You participate as a family member. And then conflict resolution is due process. I complained that they weren't doing their job and I was right. Met with a judge and got an attorney. It's like, yeah, I was right. They were wrong to the tune of 50 large. And so that goes into a bank where I then can take my son to all these different places and it gets reimbursed, but I have to front the cost, which is fine. But things like equine therapy and his specialized therapists are $200 an hour that I can't afford. And his school is $16,000 a year. So they will be paid for that as long as it shows that he's actually being educated there and not outside of class crying all the time. Why does somebody want to give you those supports if they're not working? I get both sides of the coin. I'm a little bit, let's say on one hand, I'm a nightmare mom, on the other hand, I'm a highly educated advocate. Now, these are 3 things you guys will need to know. You already know IEP. This is called an individualized education program or individual education plan, okay? There are templates that set this up. It's in a computer. It's fantastic, right? It's not handwritten anymore. The law has these main guiding principles here. Number 1 is FAPE, F-A-P-E. You guys will need to know this. And I will say FAPE 1,000 times, okay? Free, appropriate public education. Free, appropriate means it's supporting him in the way that he needs, or she. Public education. They don't just ship him off to a private school and pay for it. He is in a private school, but it's half private, half public. So a private school can set up and then say, hey, we also do the things that a public does for a non-public school, which is like a specialized, highly trained carve out, right? So it's interesting. There's public schools and then there's non-public schools, but they really are public schools, but they're just set up like a private school, but they're authorized to be used as a public school. It's weird, but that's how it works. So you'll hear me say NPS, but FAPE. So our school district did not offer us FAPE. We had to drive him to school. They weren't giving us the transportation. We had to do all this other stuff and they weren't doing their job. So FAPE, FAPE is super important, okay? Unbiased evaluation, right? If somebody says, oh, well, he's Black, so he's not that smart. Oof. IEP comes inside of that, but number 3 guiding principle, and the LRE. This is the next most important one you want to know. On your test, there's acronyms. One entire 10 points is acronyms. Make sure you write these down. Education instruction with the least restrictive environment. Least restrictive environment. Least restrictive environment. Meaning the child has to be at typically developed peers. Least restrictive environment. We start every child in with their peers. And if those MTSSs are done properly, but they still aren't working, then sometimes we just move them over to a different location. So we'll talk about placement here, but education in least restrictive environment. We don't lock them up and throw away the key. That's the most restrictive environment. We never lock children away. We never sequester children away. Oh, by the way, did I tell you that happened too? Where he was locked in a room in the library, physically abused by a staff member. He was also assaulted on the bus. Oh yeah, that district has gotten a lot for me, and it's not over. We currently have an open criminal investigation against the school. Just like, so thank God he is not in that school anymore, and he's in a high level, highly trained, different environment, but free to us, because they messed up. And you don't take the child to the supports, you bring the supports to the child. But every time they did that, they weren't good enough. They weren't helping. Yes.
Sorry. Can I ask you which school was that?
Yeah, it's middle school.
Is it Venado Middle School?
Hughes Middle School in Tustin.
Okay, because I have two special kids too. And one of them, she's on Irvine School and she's deaf. So I was like, and I have a lot of problems.
Like you gotta be on these people. You gotta be on these people.
Because right now I'm trying to, well, I'm an ASL class 2 because I just want to get my certificate.
Yeah,
I'm already
know that. Awesome. That's so great.
So yeah, so the thing is like we have this problem or issue at her school, because I guess like every Friday they public one video for everybody, and then she's attending right now the university high school, so it's a combined school, you know, so it's hearing people and then deaf people.
Yeah,
so so this video, it's like about 10 minutes, but I just find out that the hearing people, they're giving them like 7 minutes to do whatever, and then for the deaf people, they only have 3 minutes left. So I'm like, that's not fair.
Nope,
so
not.
yes, so I'm talking to her teacher, one of her teacher, her name is Tracy Miller. She's my teacher at Santa Ana College, right, for ASL. So I talked to her, and then she didn't know about these. So we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do, because how is that fair, you know?
It's not. Mama bear that. Tiger it. Go get him, girl. Go get him.
Exactly. So I'm thinking to bring all the class just to support them, to support us. Like, cause yes, it's annoying. Like for me, like it's kind of like hard.
His first attorney is Kim Smith there at Santa Ana College.
That's what I was gonna ask you. Okay, I'm gonna talk to her.
Yeah. Talk to her. Sometimes
all right.
Sometimes you just need a letter from me to remind people that the law is not optional.
Do you have her email by any chance?
You can look it up. It's Smith Kim, right, at SAC, right?
Okay, Smith Kim.
You can look it up, and you can look it up on WebAdvisor, like which classes she's teaching.
It's right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna write down. Yeah. All right, thank you.
And she's ex-military too.
Oh damn. Okay, that's good. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and then if she refers you, I have another attorney who's in Santa Ana. Let me know if you need.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, sometimes I have to tell you, people don't. I don't think people mess up on purpose. I don't think people say, well, that's the law, and I blow off the law. Sometimes people don't know. In that instance where they're just like, maybe I didn't know, like she said she didn't know, right? So I do give people the benefit of the doubt, but over the course of time, when I get story after story and thing after thing, and it's like, yeah, there's a thing. Yeah. So just mama bear, be on it, be on them, but
Yeah,
because
even the principal knows.
Yeah.
Because even the principal knows. So the principal is the same principal that on Venado and on a university, the same principal.
Oh,
So he knows and he's aware of the situation and he doesn't do nothing. So
ooh.
I'm like, yes,
So,
that's the part that's annoying me more. Yes. So they
here's the
know
thing, if
what's
they
going on.
know and they don't do it, they are infraction of the law. And then you can't.
Yeah, so I think we just I have to talk to more parents because like we all should say something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Go get them, girl.
Yep, I will. Thank you.
Keep me in the loop though, because I'll help you, mama bear, if you need.
Okay, cool. I will, thank you.
University's good. University's good. My only critique of them is they do kind of hide the students off to the side. Like the disability program is just like over by the basketball courts. It's like those other kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my.
Yes, and she's also a cheerleader. And then the hearing girl, they have like all these things that they need to train, but not my girls. I mean, like not my daughter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of things going on. But yeah, I'm just trying to.
But think about it this way: how many people know this stuff that we're talking about?
Yes, well, only people who has those childs, right? Like parents, exactly. Yes.
I didn't know what I didn't even know until I had to go down the rabbit hole. It's terrible. That's why I'm like, I'm rolling my eyes at like, I am an advocate only, but like, I'm a reluctant advocate because I had to learn. I've been through this. It's like, and then I just like, none of my friends had to sue the school district. I was like, oh, so yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's still a thing. It's still a thing. So yeah, like, so always just keep us in the. So if you look at LRE and FAPE, they have to be in balance all the time. IDEA, the Individuals Education Act, guarantees FAPE and LRE. And we'll talk more about that here because this is how we start the process. Like if you're not sure that your child's behind, let's say I've heard like, oh, my baby's such an angel. He's like 3 years old. He hasn't ever really talked. He's just so observant. He just goes with the flow. You're like, 3-year-olds should have like 2,000 words, right? So even by like 2, they should have 50 words. And I'm not saying like, like Einstein didn't talk till he was 3. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes kids do catch up, but the earlier you intervene. So this is how you first fill out a form. I literally went to his school, his elementary school, and said, hey, my child's disabled. How do I get? And the secretary there, she was like that old lady you see on the Hallmark cards, and Maxine. She's like, well, how do you know he's disabled? I was like, well, he was 6 weeks early and 3 pounds, and he's already been in OT, PT, and speech with Kaiser. She's like, okay, fine, here, fill out this form. I was like, it goes to the district. It really doesn't start at the school. It goes with the district, and the district has these restrictions like 15 days to respond with writing. If they are 16 days, they're already out of compliance, and you can get them for due processes. But usually at that beginning, you don't really know, but it's this thing. Again, at birth, you can tell if there's a chromosomal disorder like Down syndrome, which is called trisomy. And again, there may be sickle cell disease or PKU, which is phenylketonuria, which is very rare. But again, and then things with delayed milestones. You could have a child who just has a very low APGAR score, who's not very moving, who's not responding to certain things. They're just super duper slow. And this is the hospital would kind of start the IFSP process a little bit. Again, here's developmental milestones. You can kind of look at those things. I knew at 3 months, my son was a little bit behind, and at 9 months, he wasn't even crawling. He wasn't even trying to crawl. The one thing that he was ahead of time was language. I taught him ASL. He had 50 signs by 1 year. And so he would communicate a lot in sign. And so people would say, oh, he's not talking, or no, he is talking because you have sign with him. But then I would tell him, like, let's be quiet, and then like sign only. And then he would, and then especially like across a room, you could still communicate, right? And then yelling and sign is different. So every once in a while, when he's using nasty language, like he's a teenager, so he wants to, use all the bad words. I said, okay, for the next hour, you're signing. Because there's kids who want to talk who can't talk, and you're using up all the bad words. He's like, And so it's this thing where like, oh God. So again, the child find is the first step in the pre-referral process. And again, here's the regional center system. I'm still kind of going back and forth with regional center because my son is still not super duper stable at 15, especially with internet safety. We're still looking at conservatorship. We can talk about that later. So again, how do we identify? We go through the MTSS, we do the response to intervention. If all of those steps don't work, then yes, there's probably something else going on. Pre-referral process is where you would call in the people at your school. But before an assessment, you have to get the parents' permission, okay? So again, remember the IEP process has 8 steps, but at the same time, not everybody qualifies. It's not the end of the world. There's still supports that you can put in place. Oh, and by the way, even if you do the whole assessment, they say your child doesn't qualify, you can start the assessment process again. Yeah. So again, we talk about the IFSP, the toddlers up to age 3, and then 3 through 21 is what the IEP covers. And again, my son's school right now, he has students up to 21, which is lovely. Then they have a transition program for students after 21 who are not really college eligible. Now, the Peabody School at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee is one school that's dedicated just to special education. And so I do share some of these things, and we do some of those things in our discussion board, which is awesome. So here's the process, but I do have more other graphics that are fantastic. I put them in the module towards the end. I do share in the supportive module my Pinterest board for this class. I have all this stuff. It's crazy. Sometimes you need to see this in a visual format, and I'll see if I can do that again. Pre-referral is like, okay, hey, there's something going on here. I've done all this RTI, MTSS. And then we do this referral. We talk to the parents, we get their permission. Then they do a full evaluation, starts with eyes and ears. So what if they just need hearing aid and glasses? Then they don't need a full IEP. They might just need a 504. Eligibility. Okay, maybe they do meet criteria. Which category? Where are they eligible? My student, high functioning autism. So autism, OHI with ADHD severe, and then other emotional stuff. We're not quite sure yet. The IDP development means what are we doing for this child that he needs? So again, there's different pieces of that puzzle. The development is like, what are the goals that we need to set for this kid? What does this kid actually need in order to be able to sit in a classroom and participate like his peers? Now for him, his peers are other students with autism. His peers used to be, he was in the gen ed class till 5th grade. And then as he got older, he just couldn't manage what it took to be a student in that school, in that classroom, in that environment. And then we went to kind of a half and half program, which is called like an SDC classroom. So it was like some emotional kids and some intellectually it was kind of like a mixed bag in there. And that was the middle school where it just all went, it all went terrible. But that teacher had 3 master's degrees. So what happened? Yeah, exactly. So the development is like, what does this child need? You know, does he need a one-on-one support? Does he need therapy? Does he need speech? Does he like, there's all these different pieces. That development is huge. And that's not the parents, that's the school saying, what puzzle pieces we need to have to make this picture one big picture. Then the implementation, they'll say, okay, so now we'll start the IEP, October 1st, November 1st, something like that, in October, we'll start it, whatever. They have to implement it, and it goes year by year. Okay. Then every year you review it to make sure it's working. If you've achieved the goals, you don't need that goal anymore. You write a different goal. Kids can actually age out or expire out of their IEP. You don't need this forever if you don't need it forever, right? Good. I mean, if you need it forever, great. If you don't, great. And then the reevaluation. So again, every year there's a review, but then every 3 years, it's called a triennial. And so it's kind of like re-upping your lease on your apartment or your car or whatnot like that. So I will ask you the steps, but you guys can, again, use your book, work with a friend. It's a lot. It's a lot. Again, this is a nice little flow chart here. Does a student have an identified disability? Let's say we're not sure. If we're not sure, we do an assessment. But if it's no, right after the assessment, no, they're not really disabled. They were just clowning around on the tests, right? So you don't really need services. But was there a disability? Maybe. So for my son, yes. Is he eligible for services under the IDEA? Well, my godson, no. He He just needed a little bit extra time on test and a quiet environment. So did he get a 504? Yeah. Is he eligible? Yes. He got accommodations and modifications, right? Is my son have diagnosis under the 13 categories? Yep. He gets the development and provision of special education services. It's not, my son's very clear there. But again, why they say individual education, not one IEP is the same. Not one. Not one. Not even team by team. They'll change a little bit every year, a little bit. Okay, remember, IFSP 0 to 3, IEP 2 to 21, or excuse me, 3 to 21. There could be a little bit of overlap there too, so don't worry about that so hard. Okay, there's a compare and contrast. We talked about that a little bit. Who should have access? Every parent should have a copy. My copy sitting on the coffee table right now. Every school professional who works with that child, and all these are confidential documents. Substitutes don't get copies of IEPs, and counselors don't either. If, like, let's say my friend, she's working for Turning Point and she's helping at John Muir, she doesn't get a copy unless she asks the parents, and the parents give it to her. The school won't give it to her. It's like your medical records. Okay. Again, key elements that every document have, they start with demographics. This is the child's date, age, birth, this is where they live. This is the current functioning levels. This is where the families are. This is what's going on in the family. Do they have medical insurance? So his starts with like born early, 3 pounds, adopted, blah, 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 whatever. Expected outcomes. He is on college track or not. Like, again, what services does he need? He gets speech, he gets OT, he gets therapy, he gets social skills, and he gets a lot of other things too. Service coordinator, which is kind of like a case manager. Biannual review just means like every 6 months, hey, is he on track for these goals? It's good to check in. He gets an actual goal sheet. Do I have it? Ooh, yeah, I can share. I can even make a copy of it. He gets a behavior sheet every day. I know you guys can't really see it, but it talks about the prompts that he got. I know you probably won't really say it. He got verbal prompts, gestural prompts, indirect prompts, how he did with classroom. This is his one-on-one aid does this. He's had a one-on-one aid since first grade. Why? Because you only get an aid under OHI. Just know that, right? Unless you have something else like maybe low vision or blindness. Transition plan. When he's 16, he could start next year. He can start talking about his transition plan. He wants to go to UC Santa Cruz for some reason because he's got a sticker that says UC Santa Cruz, which just says, hi, I have autism. I said, buddy, you're going to do a couple years at the community college. I think he's going to do well with robotics, engines. We have all kinds of stuff. So we'll figure it out. He doesn't need a college degree unless he wants one. He wants to work at Disney. So yeah, that's more power to him. What basic elements could every IEP contain? Right? How's he doing now? What are his goals? What are the related services? Again, PT, OT, SLP, therapy. And does he have, again, will he be in the gen ed classrooms? Right now, he's no longer in gen education classrooms because he's not at a gen ed school. He's at a different placement. And we'll talk about that too. There's levels. You definitely start them in the gen ed classroom as much as possible. And then maybe they do an 80% of the day in gen ed classroom where they do a 20% homeroom and then go out and do gen ed and then come back. So you make a plan, you start the day in one homeroom, make a plan for the day, do all your stuff with the regular kids, come back and then like maybe do homework support or wrap it up for the day. How did your day go? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe there's an aid with them or maybe there's not. And then sometimes that goes 50-50 or it goes 20-80, meaning like we spend all day in the special ed class and then one class you get to go out and hang with your typical peers. You see this, like these little steps to see where the sweet spot is for that kid. Mine was not in the general education setting. It was for a while and then it wasn't. Again, participation, he's gonna do testing. All students do testing. A lot of this testing doesn't really count. I usually write them off of the testing because you can request, and he'll say, no, mom, I want to do it with the rest of the kids because we get a pizza party. I'm like, fine, whatever. Those large scale tests don't do anything for anybody, but they're just, we'll talk about that more. Dates and places, where he get the services, will he see his therapist on campus or blah, blah, blah. Transition service needs around 16, age of majority rights. It's like, yeah, 16, 18, and then progress. How do we measure his progress? We have daily reports. Behavior intervention plans. So now if we have additional parts, so let's say you have this kid who qualifies for an IEP, all the parts of the IEP in place, but we need a specialized little piece for somebody who's more behavioral than others. And so it's called a behavior intervention plan, a BIP. Okay. A BIP is only in place with the parent's approval after they qualify. So they have to qualify. They can't say, oh, you just get a 504, but we'll put you on a BIP. No, BIP only comes with an IEP after they qualify, right? And usually a BIP doesn't come with, like, usually a kid with a learning disability doesn't have a huge behavior issue, but if they do, you put a BIP in. The BIP is like, what do we, so we do a functional behavior assessment. If this kid's knocking over desks or running out the door, what do we do? Yeah, and why are they doing that? Are they trying to escape? Are they trying to get attention? Things like that. It's very ABA based, and we can talk more about that. And then the BIP is like, what do we do if that happens? Or what are some other supports we can put into place? Maybe the math is too hard. Maybe we need to move them in class, like all that kind of stuff. So the BIP is kind of interesting. Certain districts in certain locations do it differently. They also can ask for parent permission to do a crisis, like a non-invasive hands-on. And so my son can be big. He's like kicked open doors. I mean, like broke through a door in my house. He broke a recliner chair. I mean, the other day, like picked it up and threw it into a million pieces. And so he can be pretty aggressive sometimes. It's not usually at people, but in that case, I gave his school permission to do like a like a really gentle hold if they need to do it. Yeah, they've never had to do it though. They've called the sheriff out on him. Yeah, he's a charming young boy, but he's got a lot going on. Again, as they get older, we talk about different things. So we talk about what's next. We don't have to talk too much about transition because that's kind of a specialized carve out. It only shows up in older kids. And then the transition plan we talk about. Are you going to get your diploma? Are you going to get a GED? Are you going to go to college? Are you just going to go to like supported work services or things like that? So again, we talked about accommodations versus modifications. Accommodation is something that helps you get comfortable in your space to do it. So do you need more time? Does it need to be quieter? Do you need large print? Do you need glasses? Do you need hearing aids? Things that makes your space more comfortable. Modifications means, okay, you only have to do the odd numbers. You don't have to do 1 through 50. You just do 1 through 50, but just to do the odd numbers. Or even when he was in kindergarten, he only has to do 50% at 60% accuracy. I was like, oh, it just kind of depends. Or a modification is more time, right? More time. Or I tell somebody else what my answers are and they write it down because I don't have a hand and I can't write. Or another modification could be I can audio type. Yeah. So modifications, there's a lot here. Accommodations and modifications. I want to be aware of our time. It's almost 12:30. And then so again, how a student accesses instructional content. And then this is truly super tiny, but it's in your book. Who's entitled to accommodations? This is definitely 504. Again, if you have all the supports needed and you don't need any more supports, you don't need a full IEP. It's fine. And then again, accommodations versus modifications. And then you decide. The team helps decide. Yeah, could be reduces the number of problems. Could it reduces the number of the easy hard problems. So they can use an audio book. She can use a lower grade level of somebody else. He can type. Somebody can scribe for him. So it's really kind of interesting because so Peyton right now on his modifications accommodations can have a scribe. He does have dysgraphia. He can have a scribe. He can audio type. He can use a computer. It doesn't have internet access, and he's in language arts 9 instead of being in 10th grade. So things like that. So everything just kind of balances. It's like a teeter totter just to get you in a sweet spot to do well. And then if you've made that sweet spot and they're still having behaviors, and there's other things there, and mine does. So again, we have the BIP, we have counseling, blah blah blah, whatever. Okay. Special education services. Okay, again, we talked about early intervention services. Sometimes our book, I think, is a little bit backwards, but so we definitely talk about intensive services. It could be small check-in services or it could be intense one-on-one. Again, my child has a 31-year-old grown man following him around all day, and thankfully they get along, but other than that, it's kind of hard. Mr. Phillip is so cool, but don't tell him I said that. Again, what's the difference between related services and FAPE? So if my child needs speech therapy, remember this is free, appropriate public education. Speech therapy should come in school so they can talk, right? Look at what if somebody can't talk and they're learning English. Yikes. Chapter 3 and 4 together, right? Is it once a week? Is it once a day? Yeah. It's crazy. There's a lot going on. Again, every student is different. And then it talks about the difference between IFSP and IEP. We talked about that already. Specialized personnel is that SLP, the speech language therapist, the therapist, you know, the psychologist that he sees. See, here we go. A consulting teacher. Sometimes we ask for another teacher with a different set of skills. Co-teachers, sometimes we have 2 teachers. Paraprofessionals is this aid. And a transition specialist. Sometimes there is one, sometimes there isn't. And again, these are related services: psych services, speech language, OT, social work, health services. So maybe somebody has like medical stuff. They have a G tube, they have a feeding tube, they have a colostomy bag, or they need to be helped using the bathroom, or they have diabetes medicine, or they have got an EpiPen, things like that. Counseling, adaptive PE, you can have PE even in a wheelchair. Here's PT, educational interpreters. So again, you could have a speech and language interpreter or a deaf interpreter. Orientation and mobility training, that's for somebody who uses like a walking stick or a wheelchair. I actually was the last time I was at University High School, it was doing a mobility assessment with a high school student who had autism, but he was a toe walker. And so one time he fell really hard and he sustained a head injury. And so I had to kind of be with them. They actually had a mobility specialist there, and I was kind of there, and we walked through campus and things like that. And it was really kind of interesting. Please, yes, Melody, if you have to go ahead. If you guys have to go, please go.
Okay, thank you.
Just watch the recording at the end. Okay, good. And then audiology services for hearing impaired and assistive technology. So again, you might have somebody who uses Pro Quo that has the computer talk for them. And then we talked about this as infants and toddlers. Continuum of settings. Ooh, this is a big one. We talked about this in the classroom, part of the day, a little bit of the day, half of the day. This is what we're talking about here. There's a general education class. This is more appropriate, meaning this is more appropriate to positive, like age-related peers. So general education, right? So this is more common to the general education classroom. Then every once in a while, they might have to go to a resource room or have a pull-out program, right? And sometimes there's that 80-20 or the 20-80 there. Then it goes into, okay, maybe they need to be in that special ed classroom all day, or maybe he needs a separate school, or maybe they need to be in a residential facility, or we've even looked at out-of-state schools for him. So he's right here in a separate school. But it's not in the gen education classroom. It's not. He just doesn't perform well there anymore. And so if we keep telling him, like, if you're not going to do well, you're going to end up in a residential facility, and California does not have residential facilities. So he'd have to go to Utah. What? So here's placements over time. So again, we've increased students with disabilities into the regular classroom at least 80% of the day. And the green one is about half. That's gone down. The red one is a regular class, less than half or less than 40%. That's gone down. And then the separate school has kind of gone down too. So these people have shuffled into these other programs, and some of these red and green have gone to the blue. About 10 years old, but it's about right. It's about right. I'm curious of what that would look like after COVID, or they would have like a year that stopped. Oh my God. Again, in 1984, 25% of disabilities were in the gen ed classroom. In 2014, it's 63. I'm hoping more like in 2023 or 2024, it's a higher number. I don't know. This tells like who's getting what and where. And then again, in summary, you guys got this. It's a lot, but I am suggesting strongly that you guys look at all of the other supports that I put in the module. I mean, this is the module that I put the most stuff in. Stuff from Kim Smith in there as his first attorney. He was a professor at SAC. I did a separate lecture on just my son's IEP. That was during COVID. I think he comes in there with the dog towards the end. You have our lecture from last semester with myself and Professor Fernandez, and then this one too. It's a lot, but just remember, I don't cut this stuff off. And if you're seeing it as a YouTube video, make a playlist, save it, watch it later, even when you're not in this class. That's the point. Okay, good. So you guys are hanging in there. I lost a few of you, but since you guys are here, I'll show you the test. Is that what you guys are hanging out for? Yeah, Jessica's like, yeah, I'm in it to win it. So let me share the screen. I'm going to show you the test really quick. And then you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to the people who are here and just be like, hey, if you want a little walkthrough, I'll show you. Okay, so let me share. Okay, let's do the screen. Let's share the whole screen. All right, so in our module, the test is at the bottom, or you can just hit quizzes and it's there too. Try to give everybody multiple places. So again, more videos here. Here's Kim Smith, his attorney, first attorney. Wright's Law is a great local resource, and I have a book on that too. This master presentation is Kim's. Same, it's pretty much the same thing, but it's just her PowerPoint. What's the difference between ISP and IP? And then let's see here. Oh, let's see, chapter 4. I didn't put it in here. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So exam 1, I always have the same format. So true, false, multiple choice. I did acronyms, matching the steps in the process. So we're going to do the preview. I won't give you any answers per se, but you'll pick up some stuff. So chapter 1 through 4. Here's the format, true, false, multiple choice, matching, essay 10 points. We'll talk about the essay for sure. So question 1, the what perspective, so chapter 1, suggests that human behavior and characteristics are distributed along a continuum called the, there's just 2 different answers here. So see the one that matches here and the one that matches here. I'll give you a hint. It's one of the last ones. Look it up in the book. Okay. Let me look. I'm going to do the editing side so you can see all of them at the same time. Right. So here's all that. The values of fairness and equality is known as so you guys are going to see those things in here. Okay. Let me scroll all the way down to the term inclusion means. Oh yeah, there's even that last chapter. I think it's on chapter 2, the one from Professor Cass. I'm sure you watched that too. Inclusion, students with disabilities are included no matter what. Okay, how about all student disabilities will show up in preschool? Sometimes when you get into the academic classroom, like 1st grade, 2nd grade, that's when kids start getting super squirrely. That's when kids start, their scores start going down. The multi-tiered systems don't actually work, right? Let's see, parent can invite whoever they want into an IEP meeting. When students get older, they can participate in their own IEP. Yes. Gifted students will always have the supports they need, right? And then this one is match the steps in the IEP process order. So I put all the steps here, and you just have to match the number, which step it is. It's right there in the book. You guys got it. The acronym with the correct term. You guys, we talked about today, FAPE, LRE. I did mention SLP, LD, ELL, ESA, ESEA, IDEA, ADA, IEP, IFSP. You guys got this. Yeah, you got it. All right. So here is our video. I'm going to make sure it actually works. You'll watch a video on your special education rights website. It's really easy. Okay. But this one is specific, and I want you guys to know this one. It's 2 women talking, and they're talking about the difference between eligibility and diagnosis. Now, I mentioned earlier that diagnosis only happens with a doctor, right? And eligibility happens with an IEP. So why is there, I'm going to have you ask in your own words, I'm going to say this, 100 words, I'm going to say 3 paragraphs, 4 small paragraphs with, so just make, so if you see, I'm going to do this, take this off. I'm going to say, and I'm going to make this a number so we know 1, 2, 3, 4. Good to see my editing capabilities here. Why? So make 4 small paragraphs with 100 words minimum. So it's like 25 words per. Come on. I'm going to say 100 plus. Just, well, let's do 100. Let's say 100. I'll say 150 because 4 small paragraphs at 25 words each, that's nothing. That's like 2 sentences, maybe 3. So why is there a difference? Make a small paragraph. Why is there a difference between eligibility and diagnosis? Who determines eligibility? Who determines diagnosis? And as a teacher, how do you use those terms appropriately? You guys got it. So breathe. I'm going to see if I can actually get the video right now. Make sure it's working still. Yay!
If you're going back to school, before you submit your essays, run it through Grammarly to quickly check for spelling, punctuation, or grammar mistakes.
It is literally 4 minutes. The attorney was an advocate. show you. So these two ladies talk, big deal. Look at over here. Look at all this stuff. Oh, by the way, all this information that I shared with you, is it different in different school districts? No, the law is the same. Sometimes the terminology is slightly different. You know, you might not see the word child find, but you'll see pre-referral. You might not see special education, but you might see special day class, or you're going to say augmented support services, things like that. So again, look at all this other stuff. Hello. Hi, Jessica. You're not just jumping in. I have to leave. Okay, good. This is it.
I have to go with my.
Yeah, but I'm good. I think I got everything. Do you have any questions?
So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
And then here on this last one for extra credit, super easy. Use person first language, child with, student with, boy who has. People mess that up all the time. It drives me crazy. Please, chapter 1. That's extra credit up to 5 points, maybe more. Good. Okay, let me know. Send me emails, messages, whatever you guys need. I appreciate you guys hanging in there. I'm glad that